Hey guys, it's me, Brandon from BKM Pictures, and today I want to take a look at a camera that has now been around for a while, the Canon C100. The Canon C100 was released in 2012, and ever since then it has almost seemed like an outdated camera. Every year since then, people have been coming out with videos like why I bought a Canon C100 in 2013, or why I bought a Canon C100 in 2014, etc. So today, as is the trend, why I bought a Canon C100 in 2018. The other big cameras on the market have party tricks. The GH5 has internal 4K at 200 megabits a second, that's insane. The A7S needs no introduction, but it's a low-light monster, it can literally see in the dark. The Blackmagics have unbelievable codecs and can shoot RAW, and the Canon C100 has... what? What is the trick of the C100? Well, truth be told, it doesn't have one, and that's why people have always been so hesitant about this camera. But it's not a trick that makes this camera so good, it's the sum of all of its parts. To begin with, battery life. On one battery and one charge, you can shoot for the better part of 5 hours. If you get a few cheap third-party batteries like I did, you will practically be set in any location for any amount of time. The included Canon brand battery runs at about $150, but I found a deal on Amazon for 2 of the same third-party battery for around $20. Granted, they don't last quite as long, but at that price point, they are incredible. It seems like every camera now shoots at 4K, hell, even the iPhones now shoot at 4K. The Canon C100 does not. It does, however, have a 4K Canon Super 35 CMOS sensor, which is the same sensor found on its big brother, the Canon C300. So even though the dimensions of the footage are not 4K, it is essentially the same as shooting on 4K and then downscaling to HD. The detail in the images that come out of this camera are insane. With proper export settings, projects shot on this camera can look just as crisp and sharp as something shot on a C300. When the camera first came out in 2012, it was priced at around $4,000, but since then it has decreased pretty dramatically. First to $2,500 after the Mark II was announced, and then even more once the dual pixel autofocus upgrade became a thing. Now, for the body only of the C100 without autofocus, it runs on Adorama camera for around $1,700 or $2,000 on B&H. Discussing price, there's another huge bonus to this camera. In essence, what you get is all that you need. Straight out of the box, with a lens and a memory card, you are ready to shoot. Whereas other more compact cameras, like the A7S or the GH5, need hella accessories to even get something that's half decent. The Canon C100 is a self-contained beast. Arm on top contains a damn amazing stereo microphone, and it has powered XLR inputs with gain controls. It's not ideal for dialogue, but for ambient noises or anything omnidirectional, it's pretty fantastic. Now, before I continue blowing smoke, there are some negative aspects to this camera. First is the codec. On the Mark II, there's an option to record either MP4 or AVC HD, but this is not an option here, as only AVC HD is available on the Mark I. To begin with, finding the footage is kind of an interesting process. You can either import the entire AVC HD package into Premiere, but then you kind of just get every clip that's been recorded on the card. To access the individual clips, it's Canon, then to private, to AVC HD, to show package contents, to stream, and then there are the individual MTS files. You know, it's not a huge deal, but AVC HD is not a very robust codec. It records at 24 megabits a second, which is roughly the same as on an entry-level DSLR, like the Canon T3i. Because of the codec, there is less flexibility for pushing the image in post, hence where C-Log comes in. When recording video, Rec. 709 is what we're usually used to looking at. This is full, contrasty video like you'd get out of a DSLR or on your phone. Then there's log. This is intentionally drained of all contrast to maximize the camera's dynamic range and retain as much detail as possible. This is what you would get out of a Blackmagic or a higher level camera that has robust codecs. But then there's C-Log, which is Canon's own flavor of log. It's some kind of a weird middle ground between the two. See, this is Rec 709. This is log. And then this is C-Log. This is both a good and a bad thing. It's good because it maximizes the detail of the C100's 13 stops of dynamic range. It's bad because it's kind of strange to work with. Most LUTs are either made for Rec 709 or log footage. I mean, there are conversions you can get, but either the conversion to Rec 709 makes the footage lose some of its integrity, or the conversion to log makes the footage too flat and the bitrate just can't support it. There's also a bit of a learning curve to this camera. So coming from a DSLR background, my typical process to setting up the camera was shutter speed at 1/50th of a second, ISO as low as possible, and then aperture to compensate whatever lighting you would need. And I think this is the process that most DSLR users use. However, the difference with the C100 is the native ISO. On this camera, it's ISO 850, which is relatively high, and it's kind of the middle ground between the full dynamic range of the camera and the least amount of gain necessary. If you were to go below ISO 850 to say ISO 300, the lowest the camera can go, it would really severely clip the highlights of your video. And I made this mistake the first few times that I used the camera, and the footage ended up looking like just complete shit. Now that I've covered some of the trepidations I've had with this camera, let's get back into the positives. This one is a little bit superficial, but it is big. Maybe not compared to a C200 or an Alexa, but compared to a DSLR or especially a mirrorless camera, this is a pretty thick camera. It's also a catch-22. On the one hand, having a big camera gives it more weight, which then reduces the amount of jitter that you would get by shooting handheld. On the other hand, holding this camera for extended periods of time, it can get tiring. Especially if it's on a rig and there is no first AC to pull focus, you are essentially supporting the camera with one hand while the other adjusts the focus. After around 15 or 20 minutes, fatigue starts to set in. The camera does come apart nicely, however. If it's completely stripped down with a light lens like the Canon 50mm, the weight is really a non-issue. The other nice part about having a large camera is that it is noticeable. For most non-camera buffs, the assumption is that a larger camera is better. Even if there is no real difference in the quality between a Canon C100 and a Sony a7S, a potential client is going to assume that the guy with the bigger camera is more professional. Again, there is no actual merit to that argument, but it is just the way that people think, unfortunately. Conversely, a negative is that it's noticeable. If you were trying to be discreet or capture documentary footage in a place where you are really kind of not supposed to be filming, it's really hard to conceal. At least with a DSLR, it can either not be noticed or it can just be assumed that you're taking photos. But with this camera, the C100, it's very obvious that you were taking professional quality video. So, in summary, this is a great camera. It's about workflow and it's about results, and in both of those categories, this camera continues to impress me. The footage looks incredibly crisp. Coming from the background of a Canon T3i with its nice but kind of muddy sub 1080p sensor to this kick-ass CMOS 4K sensor, every time I open a clip, I'm just a little bit shocked. The footage is very flat, but it's easily workable. With a program like Film Convert, if you download the camera profile for the C100, then you really will be set. Film Convert is an amazing program that I've been using for around a year now, and what it does is it emulates different film stocks, and it uses individualized inputs depending on your camera and the picture settings. It's used by guys like Philip Bloom and lots of online video makers, and I've really just kind of been in love with the different looks that you can get out of it. It does cost some money, however, so I've also found that CineSpace 50 on Adobe Premiere is a good place to start to correct and grade your footage. As of now, February 2018, I've already shot 5 projects with this camera, and I am really looking forward to shooting many more with it. So the big question, should you get this camera? My answer is that if you want an all-around good camera that gets the job done, yes. If you really need 4K, then no. If you really need unbelievable low-light performance, then no. If you need to be discreet when you film, again, no. But if you do commercial or a music video or narrative work that you know that you need something reliable that's going to give you an easy, quick workflow, then I'd say you should get this camera. Whether it's the Mark I, like I have, or the Mark II, which has some nice added features like a 4K HDMI output. Anyway, this has been Brandon KM from BKM Pictures. Check the notes down below for some interesting links and related content, and I will see you guys next time.